dos olhos meus e a luz dos olhos teus resolvem se encontrar. Ai, que bom que isso é, meu Deus, que frio que me dá o encontro desse olhar. Mas se a luz dos olhos teus resiste aos olhos meus só pra me provocar, meu amor, juro por Deus, me sinto incendiar. Meu amor, juro por Deus que a luz dos olhos meus já não pode esperar. Quero a luz dos olhos meus na luz dos olhos teus sem mais lararará. Pela luz dos olhos teus eu acho meu amor e só se pode achar que a luz dos olhos meus precisa se casar.
The Invisible Part 4 Final. Julia was speechless and John just stared at Giorgio for a second, not believing what he was seeing. Giorgio then said, "This is Rafaela, and Rafaela, this is my old friend John and his companion. Sorry, what's your name, lady?" Julia looked at him confused and said, "That's not funny, Giorgio." So, Julia looked at Rafaela and said, "I am Julia, best friend of his wife Elisa." "Wife?" Rafaela said, confused. "Yes, wife, he married Elisa yesterday, right here in the garden of the ballroom." Julia answered. "And where is Elisa, for God's sake?" Julia said, more to herself than to anyone else in the room. So Rafaela laughed out loud, making everyone in the room uncomfortable, and spoke. "Giorgio spent the whole day and night yesterday with me, in the room. If he married someone else, must have been between one of my naps. Listen to me, miss. Julia, right?" Giorgio said in a condescending tone, "I didn't marry anyone yesterday. You must be confusing me with someone else. I spent the day the way the lady is saying. I didn't even attend the lectures yesterday." Everything was too confusing for John, so he was in silence. But one detail caught his attention. "You say yesterday at the convention, Giorgio? But the convention ended Friday, right?" "Yes, Friday, yesterday, July 22nd, you got it, buddy." Giorgio was also confused, but at that point he was starting to get annoyed at John and less friendly. "Now, if you guys excuse us, we are trying to enjoy the weekend and we are starting with breakfast." Giorgio opened the door and invited everyone out, then holding Rafaela's hand and walking to the restaurant, leaving John and Julia behind. Julia got her phone and checked. It was Saturday morning. She pointed to John, that confirmed in his own phone. They confirmed the date by asking other people in the hall and on the television. It was Saturday, July 23rd, Giorgio and Elisa's wedding day. Julia went to the reception and asked about the wedding happening in there, and the receptionist told her that the weekend was full of weddings indeed, but none of them had a bride named Elisa White. However, there are a Ms. and a Mr. White hosted in there. Julia asked if she could get the room number, and the receptionist agreed to call the room to ask permission for Julia to knock on their door, but no one answered the phone when she tried. At least, they had a start. Cass, Beth, and the babies were coming to the reception with their bags. Cass approached them and said, "Hey John, we missed you last night. It was everyone at the bar but you. By the way, nice to meet you. I am Cassidy, and I imagine you are the reason we couldn't find John yesterday," she said, extending her free hand to Julia. The toddler in her lap, Andy, then jumped on Julia, trying to play with her necklaces as he had done before, and Julia questioned herself if Andy remembers her at all. "Sorry for that, he doesn't go with people easy, he is shy," Beth said, getting him back and sitting him with his brother in the stroll. Beth then asked Cass to go, because they were almost late for the checkout time, and before Cass could answer she said goodbye to John and Julia and started walking to the reception. While Cass was following her, she looked back at John and moved her lips in an "I like her, she is pretty." Julia grabbed his hand and said, "Do you remember yesterday?" "Of course, I do," and John started to describe their night, including how impressed he was with her and how much he enjoyed. He wanted to reassure her, but also himself, that they were real independently of what crazy bullshit was happening. Julia embraced John's waist and said, "Thank you, I have the same memories as you, that's something. And I also had a wonderful night yesterday. And I want this to keep happening for a while." Due to their situation, she didn't know what to expect anymore and felt free to be honest about how she felt. Suddenly, they listened to a known voice. They followed it and found Ms. White walking through the hall on her way to the elevator. Julia ran to her and asked Ms. White, "Do you remember me?" Ms. White looked at her for a few seconds and answered, "I am sorry, dear, I can't remember all of my students, but I am happy you remembered me." She was a retired English teacher. Juliet and Elisa had classes with her in middle school years ago, but that wasn't the memories she was talking about. Some of the most precious memories of Julia's childhood were playing in the Whites' backyard with Elisa, so that was emotionally overwhelming to her. "And Elisa? We were friends when you gave me classes." Julia asked with tears in her eyes, "You really don't remember me?" "I'm sorry, dear. I think I remember having a student named Elisa, but so long ago that I was not catching the details in my mind. I had too many students in my career, and I always feel happy when one recognizes me. I am with my husband in the pool. You and your boyfriend are welcome to join us if you want." Ms. White was being sweet with Julia, but she seemed disturbed, and John thought it was best to take her to a private space. But she was already following Ms. White to the pool, so he just held her hand tight and walked together. Ms. White introduced her husband to John and Julia, and he seemed to be happy to have them there. They were very lovable and easygoing, as Julia knew well, but John didn't have contact with them before and enjoyed their company. Julia was quiet, just watching them chat, and John was concerned about what was happening in her mind. John asked, "What bring you guys here?" "It is our anniversary, so we decided to travel and celebrate it," Ms. White answered. John thought at least that part of the story was matching. That was good, sounds nice. So suddenly Julia asked, "And do you guys have kids?" "We tried for years because it was one of our dreams, but unfortunately, we have never been blessed with a child," Mr. White answered with a sad smile. Julia couldn't hold her tears anymore. "Excuse me, I need to go to the restroom," she said, walking away as fast as she could. Ms. White was concerned about Julia and wanted to check on her, but John refused. "I appreciate Ms. White, but I can handle it, don't worry." "Thanks for your kindness," John said, walking away to look for her. He found Julia in the same part of the garden they hid and spent time together, on the last night of a different life. "John, what is happening? What does all this mean? I need to find Elisa," and got her phone to try to call her or text her. But there was no Elisa in her phone agenda. Julia couldn't find her number anywhere. She put away her phone and started crying like a child, while John held her in his arms to calm her down. John understood Julia's pain for Elisa's disappearance, this time for real, but he was more concerned about how the hell was Saturday again and what was going to happen Sunday, if Sunday comes. John decided to look for Elisa online, so Julia could calm herself down and he could occupy his mind. So, he asked her in a very calm and low voice, "Julia, come with me, I have an idea." She cleaned her face with the palm of her hands and followed John to his room, where he kept his laptop. Before starting, John pulled Julia to the bed and held her tight. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Helping you to sleep, so I can try to find Elisa online while you rest," John answered. Julia was so upset with the whole situation, confused and feeling overwhelmed that she only whispered, "Thank you," kissed him, and relaxed in his arms to try to rest. And after 15 minutes she was in a deep sleep. So, John got his computer to search for Elisa. He looked for her on all social media, the university website and the lab page where she works, then Giorgio and the White's social media pages, and there was nothing at all, no sign of Elisa anywhere. After he tried to find any Elisa White in the world, and he found some, but not Julia's Elisa, her friend was gone. Suddenly, John remembered he had an old picture of Elisa with Giorgio and other friends in one of Cass' Halloween parties on his own page. Checking the pictures of that day, he not only couldn't find Elisa, but also saw some people there that he couldn't recognize at all. That made him start digging on his own page, and to his surprise, there were pictures of places and trips he didn't remember to go to, and people he doesn't remember to know, with one common circumstance. Giorgio was always with him. That was mind-blowing. John felt he should sleep too because that was overwhelming. That was blowing his mind, and he gave up on trying to understand what was happening. It was beyond his comprehension, and he didn't even care to know. He just wanted things to be normal once again. He decided not to mention his discoveries to Julia, not to disturb her even more. Then he had a thought that scared him for a second. What if tomorrow is Saturday and someone else is gone? Maybe me, maybe her, he thought, looking at Julia sleeping. I don't know. John then went to bed and tried not to wake Julia up, not to scare her. She opened her eyes still sleepy and whispered, "John, did you find her?" "No, babe, I am sorry." John was really feeling sorry for her, and for Elisa, and himself. Julia pulled him closer and kissed him, starting something no one of them wanted to stop. Maybe Julia had the same thought, or what if he doesn't remember me tomorrow? Maybe she was also afraid to quit existing at all. That made him feel desperate not to waste any other second of his life. Tomorrow he was going to find out how things were going to be, but today he was just going to live. They spent the rest of their night together, enjoying each other's company, talking and making love, kissing and dreaming, and by 4 a.m., they fell asleep. In the morning, John woke up first, and Julia was still in his arms, sleeping. John silently thanked her for the past night. It was one of the best days of his life. John looked at his phone, and it was Sunday. He was supposed to go to the airport later, so he still had a couple more hours to enjoy. Julia woke up and noticed him awake. She smiled at him, and he kissed the tip of her nose. They start kissing and then making love again, and almost missed the hotel breakfast. After they ate, Julia went to her room to pack her bags and take them to her car. John did the same and put his bags in her car so she could give him that ride to the airport. While they were still in the parked car, they made plans for Labor Day. John was going to visit her and spend the holiday weekend at her house, not a hotel. He was going to watch her show and maybe risk playing with her 1 or 2 songs. They made plans for after the holiday as well, and when it was time, they went to the airport together. While John was on the airplane, he couldn't stop thinking about Julia. Somehow, that short weekend was enough for him to feel so attached that he was sure about trying the long-distance relationship. Julia made him feel in a way that he hadn't felt in years, and to him that was a sign that it was worth trying. Maybe she was his soulmate or anything like it, the type of woman you just know immediately that it's the one. He couldn't remember really well how they met each other. Probably he was too drunk in the hotel bar after the conference to be capable to ever remember, so he made a note to himself in his phone: "Tell Ricky to ask Julia how we met each other, so he could know the story before she finds out that vodka is his kryptonite and completely takes his memory away." It looks like a good plan, he thought, imagining how the plans they made were going to be. John lay in his sit, trying to find a good position to sleep, and before he fell asleep, he had an idea. If this worked and he ever marries Julia, they should have the wedding in the hotel where they met. That would be very romantic and meaningful for sure. He fell asleep even before the airplane departed and started dreaming about Julia and the amazing weekend they had.
Thanks for watching. Like, comment and subscribe. Check out our website to read more tales. www.foresttales.com